Welcome to Mixed Messages, a show where each episode we discuss someone's personal mixed race experience. I am your mixed race host, Sarah Donahue. Now, it is my great pleasure, my great honor to introduce my guest, my long anticipated guest, Steve Majors. Yeah.
That was quite a big buildup, but thanks, Sarah. I appreciate
And with good cause. Not big enough. Not big enough. Steve, I can't wait. So let's not wait. I need to know, what are you?
Yep. So I call myself a mixed race Black person, but I will tell you, my family used to call me Yella, and so this is a picture of me when I was very little, and as you can see, I sort of look quite different from the rest of my family. My mom had 4 kids by the same husband, and during a break from that relationship, she had me out of wedlock. My dad is white. I have no idea who he is, never met him. And for many years, I didn't know what to call myself. And it's only now, sort of as an adult in hindsight, that I proudly call myself mixed race Black.
You recently published this book, Hi Yella. And for people who don't know or can't guess, what does that mean?
It is fairly commonly known and well used in the Black community. Having said that, as we know, there are many words used in the Black community that others who are not in the Black community should never use.
Yes.
I would consider High Yellow to be one of those.
I'm Redbone, so
yeah.
so I've been told.
Well,
yeah.
I tell my daughter she's Redbone too. So anyway.
Yes.
It was a term meant to describe very light complexion Black people who mostly were mixed race, could have been fully Black, but again, were very light complexion. It was used in a way, I think to convey that those who might have thought better of themselves, a more elevated status.
And if I'm not mistaken, was it your grandma who said that?
Yeah, it was. And so, grandma grew up in Culpeper, Virginia, and I probably was not the first High Yellow person she'd ever seen. I probably was the first person in her family. It was an endearing term. It was loving.
Yeah.
But it's also a term, as in a family like this, where all, as a little kid, where all you want to do is belong.
Yeah.
And you want to feel like you're a part of them. If people start to describe you as something other and use a term that's meant to say you are different, it can grab a hold of you in a different way, even if it was meant like non-disparagingly. For a little kid, I think it also has it has the danger of saying that you're other, you're not of us.
You said your grandma is from Virginia.
Yep.
Can you say it how she would say it? How she would say it?
She said, Stevie, you High Yellow. Get that High Yellow boy over here.
What would you say the book is about?
It was about growing up in a family that was filled with quite a bit of trauma, abuse, and addiction. And it's a story about a boy who's trying to find his way in that family, who is trying to find his identity, who is trying to find who his birth father is, and is trying to find a way out and a way through. But it is a story of how that boy grows up to be a man, and that finds that trauma is, the echoes of trauma still reside inside him. And as he creates a family of his own, a family where his kids and where he and his husband look different from other families, he's struggling to reconcile who he is even still as an adult. And it's a story of how you sometimes have to reclaim your past in order to chart a path forward in the future, even if that past is difficult and painful.
Tell me about the family you grew up with.
My mother had 5 kids with an alcoholic and an addict who was very abusive, and had 4 kids right in a row. And about 8 years after her 4th child, she was on a break from this man, and she had me. The product of all that I know very vaguely is a very hush-hush, secretive affair, brief affair with a white man. We lived in a rural area in Western New York, between Buffalo and New York. And so it was me amongst all these folks who were much darker than me, my family. So I stuck out from them. And we stuck out in the community that we lived in, because it was a predominantly white rural community. And so our tribe, who we lived on a hill out in the country in the middle of cornfields, with my grandmother and her partner on one side, and my aunt and her husband and child on the other side. And I would like to say it was a safe place up on top of that hill. But it wasn't always a safe place. It was a place where we stewed in our own turmoil, where we fought amongst ourselves, where we fought to be accepted in the wider white community. And where each of us, I think, to different results, tried to fight our way out. And some of us were more successful than others.
Tell me about your family now.
And this picture's a little bit older. So this is my family today. So it includes my husband, Todd. And our 2 daughters, Claudia and Shoshana.
Okay.
Who, in the book, they have different names.
Right.
I'm okay to use their names here one time. It's only because they've read the book. They know about the book. What I tell them as well, they will have to make a decision, like in a wider world, how much they want to associate themselves with the book. But painstakingly, because in the context of the book, I wanted to anonymize their names. But they're happy for me to talk about them today.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and they've read the book and understand all the things that are, that happened in my family and in our current family as well. And we're coming to terms with a lot of that.
I am going to refer to them as their names in the book.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mariah is the eldest and Rachel
Correct.
is the youngest. Okay.
Correct.
I want to talk about some instances where the past intertwines with the present. You discuss when you and your mom would go places with you as a kid, and people would give your mom looks like, what is this Black woman doing with this assumed white child? What is your Black mom doing with this child? And fast forward to today, when you are still white assumed, as is your husband.
Yep.
And you have 2 Black children. And unfortunately, like you said, you still don't fit people's perceptions, a lot of people's perceptions of what a family should look like.
We've been policed in public.
I want to talk about that.
This is a quick story about when the kids were very little and we lived in New Orleans. The fact that we couldn't hide in plain sight became clear during our first sweltering summer in the city. We booked a room for the weekend at a French Quarter hotel. It offered maximum air conditioning, a cooled indoor pool, and a chance for an overnight staycation in a place where someone would cook and clean for us. As we walked through the lobby, I felt anxious. I asked Todd to go to the registration desk by himself while I stood back with the kids. As we walked to the rooms, I put my fears at ease initially after a woman on the housekeeping staff stopped us in the hall. She scanned our kids up and down, then smiled. "They're sisters, right? I can tell." With that, I relaxed. The hotel was mostly empty, so the staff gave the kids free run of the site and free desserts, and the weekend flew by in a flash. By Sunday morning, we were relaxed, packed up, and ready to return to our house across the city. But Mariah had decided she liked staying in this big house with a pool. By then, I think she was 6 or 7. No, I don't want to go, she announced, exercising her independence. I know, sweetie, Todd said gently, but we can't stay. It's checkout time and you've got school tomorrow. Todd reached for her hand and tugged her out the revolving door. He struggled to pull our suitcase behind him while keeping another bag from falling off his shoulder. They walked ahead while I pushed Rachel in the stroller. Soon they turned the corner, but I could hear Mariah's protest echo down the street. No, I don't want to. Keep walking, I called ahead to Todd. She's just tired. Her sobs died down. As I rounded the corner a minute later, I spotted why. A block ahead, they were stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. A middle-aged Black woman stood in their path. My chest tightened. I race-walked the stroller ahead in time, and Todd turned to reassure me. It's fine, he said, but I wasn't convinced. What's going on? I asked the woman. Can we help you? The woman looked at me and Todd. Well, I saw this little girl crying and this man, well, she seemed upset, she explained. It took only a moment to picture what she'd seen. A white man leading a little Black girl down the street as she cried, no, I don't want to go. She's ours, understand? I snapped. Here, you want to see? I pulled out my wallet and thrust a family picture toward the woman. I'm so sorry, she said, backing away. Really, it's no problem, Todd said. He offered an understanding smile, but I glared at them both. All I could feel was anger. That's an echo of my past.
Exactly.
Because I remember instances of walking into stores with my mother and people treating us like we were like not connected, that I wasn't her son. Mm-hmm. And so that was hard for me to kind of have an example of that with my own kids.
Tell me about the other instance that you read about what happened at the ice cream shop.
This one was actually just scarier. We were in a parking lot. Our kids were much older. They were probably like in 6th and 7th grade. And, folks will read the book. My oldest daughter, she's a little sassy, she's got a strong will. And we were having, an argument in the parking lot over something she wanted, and I just said no. And we get in our car to go, and these women pull their shopping carts ahead of our car so we can't leave. And we're like, what is going on? And a minute later, the mall police show up. And I think they thought we were sex trafficking these kids because they see one girl who's obviously Black, another girl who's mixed race, and they see 2 men who look white. Then there was the incident at the ice cream store where we were walking down the street and our kids, again, much older than this, they were probably now in 8th and 9th grade. And we get into an ice cream shop. We're sitting there eating our ice cream and we see 2 fully armed police officers show up at the front door. They come in, stare at us. The whole place is empty except for us. And then they proceed to beckon my husband outside and ask for his identification. And once again, someone had seen us walking down the street and felt like something doesn't look right. Yeah. And called the police on us. And I'll tell you, Sarah, for many years, I actually walked around with the kids, copies of the kids' birth certificates in their wallets. Because I was always afraid that people would question us. Yeah. So, and I'd like to say these things they only happen but one happened in New Orleans, which is, one of the most diverse cities, in the country. Another happened, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., where we live now. So.
Yeah. And I mean, you just rattled off, no problem, 3 instances. So I'm sure there are more, and more that people have thought and haven't reported.
Oh, yeah. Some people will either question you and confront you, and others will make up stories they'll create a narrative to fit their own reality other than one that they feel too uncomfortable believing could be true.
I want to talk about an incident that struck me in the aftermath of the fight you had with Mariah, I believe, when things, as the chapter says, get out of hand.
Yep.
And a white family therapist comes to talk to you and your husband, Todd. And I'm going to read what she said. Mariah might need people in her life that she can relate to. Maybe someone who is African American. And you write, was this woman coming to tell me that I was not Black enough for my daughter? I shook my head at the irony of this situation. And then Todd, your husband, said, well, there's Steve's family. And I'm thinking, or Steve. Why didn't you say in that instance, oh, by the way, I'm Black?
There is this awkward phase you go through, or no, just awkwardness that you go through. It's like, when do I show my race card? In what context? You know? I will tell you, more often than not, Black people will automatically, they can tell that I'm mixed, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah. White folks less so. And there's always this strange like thing, like, how, you know, why do I have to like, in order to be who I am, to be my identity, like I have to sort of announce myself, like, hello, everyone, I'm Black. And let me explain why I'm Black. Let me explain why I'm mixed race. Let me tell you about my, you know, my fractured family and, you know, our painful past. And so it wasn't that I was something that I was ashamed of, but it was more like this burden, like, oh my gosh, right? Like,
yeah,
I've got to just sort of explain myself to everyone.
Yes.
And it's not enough to just say, well, you know, I'm mixed race and Black. Then it's like, you know, you get the eyebrow raised, and then you've got to explain this, you know, like so usually I find ways for it to come out in, like, I just started a new job. And one of the first things that I did is my first week, I sent out a message and I'm like, and here's my family.
Yes.
And I sent out pictures of both my family of birth and my chosen family. And I just mic drop. Like, if you have questions, you come and ask me, but I need to explain no more.
Absolutely. But I will say it sucks. It sucks. And I do hear you, and I hear it's exhausting. Like, oh, here we go. And I remember actually like having pictures of my family in my phone, right? Of my dad. I'm Black. I don't believe you.
Oh, what? Yeah.
How much? Boom, boom. Here, I'm Black. Oh, and I mean, it felt like I'm showing my papers.
Yeah.
I'm actually showing my papers. And I mean, this is like, I haven't done this in like 12 years because it dawned on me. I felt it. I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Why do I have to explain myself? But it is absolutely exhausting. And then, like you're saying, when do I do it? Because, and my brother and I have had this conversation, and I believe it changes. It changes in different points in your life, and it changes depending on who you're talking to and depending on the situation. But like, you started a new job, instead of, I hear you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't want to, in every conversation, have to, guess what, or surprise, or not say anything, or, oh, by the way. Instead, you were like, hey, everybody, I'm mixed, I'm Black, don't do it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was very intentional. I was like, I don't want to have to deal with the conversations, and yeah. And so I just put it out there.
I've heard a lot of specifically African American people say that being Black has less to do with color, with shade, and more to do with culture and how you grew up. And I want to know your thoughts on that. Do you subscribe to that belief?
Oh, absolutely. I'm proud of the very rich culture we have, which, you know, has shared history and language and music and food and values, right? And ways of being and operating and looking at the world. I'll be honest, there are parts of me is like, I'd like to just tell people that I'm Black. I'm like, there are people in the Black community, I believe, who will never really consider me like Black. I'm mixed race. I'm accepted in the Black community, but folks say, no, you're not Black, you're mixed or whatever. Same way that my family did, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't Black, I was Yella.
Yella. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and that's why I tell folks I'm mixed race Black. And if they want me to unpack that, I'm like, well, I mixed racial background, but I identify as Black because of my family background, because of my culture, because of, the spaces where I feel most comfortable in, the groups where I feel most affinity.
You brought up a point that mixed race people have, is that other people are always telling you what you are.
Yeah.
It's confusing and it's frustrating because it's like, no. I mean, you just said what you are. You just said how you identify, and it's like, It has a lot to do with complexion.
Yes.
I want to get into that a little bit more. And it's the past and the present coming together. Growing up, you were told by everyone in your family that Pops, Dad, was your biological father.
Yep.
And even when you rummaged around and found your birth certificate and you just knew, it still said on your birth certificate that he was your dad. And your youngest, Rachel, who is mixed, was told that she shared both the same mother and father as Mariah. And when and it's listed on her birth certificate. But when you and Todd went and met her, you were like, ain't no way. No.
and that probably wasn't fair, but I did it anyway. I'm like,
I know. And I was just like, well, when you know, you know. I mean, you knew. Yeah. And I want to go to fast forward. You decide to get concrete confirmation as to who your father was, as to the race of your father. And you do 23andMe DNA. And it comes back, surprise, your father was white. There it is. And you say something about this that struck me. And we just touched on it, but here's the quote. Many times throughout my life, people have seen something in my features and asked, what exactly are you? My only reply was what I knew. Mixed race, Black and white, a person of color, and sometimes biracial. Now with confirmation of race and ethnicity, I say the same things. After all, how could I claim to be anyone else? Now, what do you mean by that? Do you mean because of your shade, your complexion, you couldn't claim to be anything else?
For me, it was of me saying, you know what? I have always thought this was who I was all along. Yeah. These results don't matter, but they confirm what I always know. I know my identity. And even I think this is interesting, Sarah, what if those results had came back that I was fully white? Like by some strange fluke, right? Maybe my mother had secretly adopted me and never told me.
Yeah.
I would never be anything than what my life created my identity. And that identity is as a mixed race Black person.
Yeah.
And so that was me saying, like, I would never be anything else based on my life experiences and how the world shaped me to be.
What if Pops had been your dad? What if it turned out that the flip side? What if that?
Yeah. It's rare, but as you know, anything can come out in the washing machine, right? Like yes. Brown folks, right? There could be, recessive gene and one child could come out very white. For me, it wouldn't have changed. I still would have considered, I may have said, well, I'm Black, but that would have been a profound thing for me and for folks who read the book, for me to believe that I was his son, because there was so much of my life has been about trying to distance myself from him and his legacy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that would have been quite a bit of um, a really sort of big event in my life. As an adult, I learned that this man really was my dad. That would have been big.
I want to talk about what else was happening as you were getting these results. Because at the same time, Rachel, your youngest, who was 13,
Yeah.
okay, she was figuring out her own answer to what are you at the same time. And this scene, woo! And then one day she walks out of her bedroom and the decision had been made. Blackest beautiful shirt, gold hoops, listening to Drake, like her hair picked out as an afro. You were like, okay then. All right. Decision made. And she was carrying the book The Hate You Give.
Oh yeah.
And you asked
what that was her Bible for a while.
That's what it said. And it was about a Black girl caught between a white world at school,
yep,
and a Black family at home. And oh, you sympathetically put your arm around her and you were like, I know what you're going through. It's confusing. I didn't know my father. And she was like, come on, Dad. Come on, Poppy. I know who I am. I'm not confused. I'm Black.
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, I think it's fascinating because the confidence that she has that I didn't have as a kid, yeah. Right? And I think I'd ask her today, she does not consider herself mixed race. She will automatically say that she's Black. Now, let's go there. Like, her shade is a little bit darker than mine. I call it the shade of sort of weak tea, or a good summer tan, right? Yeah. And so she's less likely to be challenged about her identity of Black than I would have been.
Todd is white, identifies as white.
Does he consider himself white? No. He considers himself Jewish first.
Where is he around these conversations and milestones surrounding racial identity?
He's left a lot to me.
Okay.
And, tried to be supportive. I think he also leaves a lot to the kids to figure out on their own. Mm-hmm. I think for him, somebody who, obviously as a gay man, he, we brought both of that to sort of our family, this idea of searching for identity, searching for a chosen family, searching for acceptance. So he understands why what that journey was like for him as a gay man. And so I think he respects and understands the journey that our kids have been on as well, in terms of, who am I?
So you grew up in a Black family.
Yep.
What are some of the things they would say about white people?
Oh, well, white people were not to be trusted. White people were out to steal your money. White people would smile in your face and then stab you in the back. White people are only out to put you down. I mean, I could just go on and on and on and on. The beginnings of it sprung from my grandmother, who, again, was raised in the rural South, through a lot, a lot of prejudice and discrimination and violence. And so that was her experience, right, of white people. Growing up in Culpeper, Virginia, and then you move to sort of the middle of nowhere in a white rural community, and this would have been in the 30s or 40s that she moved her family up here. My grandmother, the Klan was still very well alive and present, and so. And there was still economic discrimination and racial discrimination, and as there is today.
Exactly.
And so that sort of colors, pardon the pun, the perception of white people.
I remember in the book, you were like, sometimes you thought, well, are they talking about me?
Oh, yeah.
And I also remember when your siblings wanted to hurt you, they called you white. Or when, is it Charlene? Is that your cousin?
My cousin Kathleen.
Or Kathleen. She said she called you white. funky
Oh yeah.
white ass, I think.
Oh
And it
yeah.
was like, that was the insult, the biggest insult.
Yeah. For me, yeah, to
Yeah.
call me like somebody, yeah, because I
Well,
just
and
wanted
then
to be.
for them too, I think,
Oh
because
yeah, absolutely.
however, there are so many interracial relationships in your family with white people. I mean,
Well,
you know, and I want to get to this. Oh, come on. Let me know. Let me.
so this is a picture of my grandmother
That's what we're
and
going.
her partner, John. Now, so for folks who are listening and not watching, but John was white.
Yeah.
Like, so this woman who mistrusted white people and slurred them at every turn lived with a white man for more than 40 years.
That's what I
And
was thinking. She was the one that talked the most smack. And meanwhile, yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, how do you live? I still marvel at this, right? Like, here was a man who was um, a sort of proxy father to my mother and her siblings, because my grandmother's marriage, dissolved, and she moved in with this white man who became basically her common law husband, and they lived together for 40 years. And again, in many ways was a grandfather to me, and in the absence of a dad, I considered him a father figure. So there was this confusion. My grandmother, like, how could you talk like that about people? Like, you live with a white man, right?
Uh-huh.
He's part of the family. It's interesting what happened to our family as well. Like, we are decidedly interracial today where we weren't 30 or 40 years ago. Like,
Yeah. I was surprised at how, not surprised, but I did find it fascinating how many of your siblings, and I believe and your aunt
yeah,
as well. I mean, and your mom
yeah,
um had white partners.
yeah,
And I will say, as far as your grandma goes, talking the most smack, but at the same time, she was the one that risked the most to be with a white person.
oh, absolutely.
And
So,
I wanna
yeah,
read,
go ahead.
because this, I was like, oh, damn. Riding together in a car had been forbidden by custom for at least the first decade of their life together. During those years, John and Grandma would drive off their little country road. Grandma would lie on the floor of John's truck, head covered with a coat, so that neighbors and the local clan wouldn't see her.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like the bravery that she had. Like, so this was, and recently I talked to my aunt as well, and she told me that when she was little, and again, they were living in John's house,
Mm.
at night, the police would come, and those old, like the spotlights on the sides of the car, they would drive around the house and shine the spotlight through the window, hoping to catch John inside, a white man inside, and so everybody would have to hit the floor and hide.
Oh my
Um,
God. Didn't Bonnie tell you that there was a mixed race half brother that you didn't know about?
yeah, not of me, of her. My grandmother's estranged husband had a child out of wedlock with a white woman. And for a number, his name was Chucky.
Mm-hmm.
It's a horrible name. Chucky. Chucky. And for a number of years, Chucky lived with around our family, like people, they knew him, but they gave him up for adoption. His mother gave him up for adoption, because I guess this would have been the 50s, because there was concern for his safety and the safety of the family.
Right.
Can you imagine? And so since that time, nobody has ever heard or seen from this man ever again. I came around, 15 to 20 years later,
Uh-huh.
and my mother made a decision that she was going to keep me. I don't know if she knew what color I was going to come out.
Right.
I'm sure I'm sure she'd hoped for something, a darker shade to make my life and her life maybe easier at the time.
Yeah.
But there I was, and so I think about bravery in that context as well. She went out of town to a hospital out of our town to have me, because
Yeah.
she must have guessed. And that's the reason I'll say, Sarah, like,
Yeah.
even then, she still put Pops, my stepfather, on the birth certificate as my dad, even though there was no way this man was my father.
Let's talk about who your father was, because you said there was no way, and all your life you pretty much said there's no way. And I remember in part of the book you're comparing your skin. They're saying your siblings are like, you're black, and you're like, and you would get in trouble. Like, I remember you asked Nisi if you were adopted, and when your mom came to pick you up, she told on you, and it was a really, really bad thing to ask.
Yeah. And I think it was my mother. She lived with a fair amount of shame. I'm sure she was ashamed. She didn't want to admit that she had a child out of wedlock. And so my brothers and sisters never questioned her when this child came home, when I came home.
Oh.
It was the time where, like, you don't question grown folks. You just don't.
Yeah.
You just don't. And so it was a sort of open secret in my family that, I had a different dad, though no one would tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspected as early as 5 and thought, well, gee, if I look different, the only way that's possible in my head was that I was adopted. Twice in my life did I ever ask my mother that question. Once when I was 5 and once when I was 18. I never got the answer. The first time it was, you're not adopted. I had you. Pops is your father, and you're black. And the second time, after a lot of crying, it was, okay, it was somebody else.
Yeah.
It was a traveling salesman. I'm like, really?
That is so cliche.
And what? And you were the farmer's daughter? I mean, like, my aunt who lived next door to us, she said she never knew who he was. She knows that my mother carried on a relationship with this man. He was married. He was white. And that when my mother became pregnant, he packed up his family and left town.
What are some of the most surprising reactions to your book?
People sort of setting me up as some sort of heroic figure, like, oh, I had no idea the things that you went through as a child. Like, oh my God. And I'm like, I'm still the same person. I'm still a little irreverent, a little sarcastic, a little prickly at times, generally easygoing. Like, I'm still me. Like, don't put me on any kind of a pedestal because I had a really rough childhood.
Who is the other? Is it Jim?
Yeah, my oldest brother, who I actually just talked to yesterday.
Oh, okay. And he's read the book.
Oh, yeah.
Was there any point where he said, Steve, that's not how it happened? Or that's not how I remember it? Or
it's fascinating because nobody, like, out of the two, like, my sister read it before she.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
Before she passed away. And nobody corrected it. And everybody felt like it was my interpretation. The one character in the book, my Aunt Bonnie, who some would say does not come out like out of everyone, the most shade is thrown at her, and she's still alive. I didn't even tell her I wrote the book. I was scared. I was so scared. Like, here's a woman, like, she's gonna come and beat my ass. I'm like, I'm not telling her. I'm scared.
Spoon.
The book comes out. She finds out about it, and I hear she's talking all kinds of trash about me. I'm dragging the family through the mud. I call her. It took all of my courage to call this woman. Oh my God. And I said, just read the book to the end.
Yeah.
Because she has redemption at the end. And she called me about a month later, she said, she said, I understand. She goes, it was difficult reading all those things, some of them about myself. And she said, what I've come to understand is this was how you saw things through the eyes of a child. Now, having said that, her daughter, Kathleen,
Yeah.
called me and she's like, Mama better just be glad that I didn't write the book.
Oh,
She said, because
oh,
I'd have really,
yeah.
we laughed and laughed and
Ugh.
laughed. And she's like, you go on, you tell it all.
You have a beautiful and excellent poetic way of talking about these people and describing them as layered and as human. And there are so many bad, wrong things that Bonnie did. However, like when you said Bonnie, I'm like, ah, ha, ha, because she's a trickster. How can you go to a mall, not have gas, get the, I mean, can you tell us a little, because I'm talking about this like
Oh,
people will know, but
I love this story. This is quintessential, my Aunt Bonnie. Like she could talk the birds out of the trees. So she would, if she had enough for a tank of gas, this is back in the 70s, she'd be like, she'd come over to our house, Jenya, and my mother's name was Virginia, and they called her Jenya. Jenya, I'm going to the mall. And my mother would be like, honey, you don't have any money. She's like,
uh-huh.
I don't care. I'm going to the mall.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She would go to the mall and she would get in the store and she would create this elaborate story. And I remember one in particular. See, my husband lost his job and I've got to support my family now. And I've got this job interview I got to go on. And I don't know if I could just get it on credit. Like my aunt had no credit. She's the only woman I know, and my cousin Kathleen would say, who could go to a mall with nothing but a tank of gas and come back with a new dress, a bucket of chicken, and another tank of gas. Because she would create these elaborate stories. She was the ultimate con woman.
Is there something we haven't covered that you want people, that you need people to know about the book?
The other thing that this book touches on, it's resilience. And if anything, my mother, who, and I'll show you like one of the last, do I have? Oh yeah, no, I don't. But oh yeah, it's small,
Oh,
small
good.
picture. It's one of the last pictures where she passed away. I mean, she was really a beautiful woman.
Oh, wow.
But this was a woman who went through a lot of stuff. Even hard, if my childhood was hard, hers was horrific.
Yeah.
And she taught me to persevere. And my siblings just, we, no matter what we were going through, we were going to get through it. Like family stories, trauma can be passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah.
But I also believe so can things like strength and resilience. And that is the greatest gift that my family gave to me. And it's one of the gifts that I'm trying to give to my own kids right now, in a very difficult world, the ability to just push through.
Any final words, final thoughts?
Know that no family story is perfect. Know that identity is something that comes from within and is not something that is seen from the outside. And know that sometimes you do have to reclaim your past, no matter how troubled or how traumatic, in order to really be your best self in the present and chart a future for your family.
This has been Mixed Messages. Please let me know what you think, what you want, if you want to be a guest. And I want to thank you so much, Steve, for sharing so much of yourself, your life, your heart. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being a guest. And please, please, everyone, pick up and read Hi, Yella. It is absolutely incredible, a masterpiece. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.